are you this morning?
Really good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Have you been down to the beach?
Yep, been for a run, been to the beach, done exercise class, now raring to go and to chat with you.
Well, I just bumped into one of your clients who does your exercise classes, and she said to me, so you really need to do Joe's exercise class. And I said, I still haven't found myself a fitness trainer to get fit enough to do Joe's class.
Well, that's why you come to me. That's why people say things about that when they go to fitness class. They go, I need to get fit before I come and see you. No, the whole point
I know, but you're just incredibly fit. You're just so fit. You're scary. You scare me. I said to her, I'm actually scared of Joe, so haven't been to a class. No, go on.
Do you know what I'm just going to say? Our topic today we're going to talk about is fear of failure. And this is absolutely the perfect thing. Why are you scared to come to class? You're not going to fail. Well, if you can't do 10 push-ups, I'll get to the point where you can do 10 push-ups. Don't worry about it.
Well, she did say to me do a Wednesday class because there's a bit more sort of lying on the floor and less jumping around, so I might try a Wednesday class. But anyway, fear of failure is such a great topic because you and I have failed. I mean, actually, I speak for myself. I can't speak for you. I have failed so many times in my life, and I've had to pick myself up again and again and again. And we've had lots of people say to us, can you speak on fear of failure? Because it's a big topic, especially for teens at school. Here we go.
No, I agree. And, I mean, we call them failures, you call them lessons, call them what you want. But without failure, you don't know what success is. And, think about all of these, like the person who designed the Dyson Hoover, Mr. Dyson. How many times did he design that vacuum cleaner and it failed, if you want to call it that? It failed and failed and failed and failed. I think it was like hundreds and hundreds of times, wasn't it? I can't recall the exact number in my head now. I just know he failed a lot, but he didn't give up. And now look at what he's done. He's, there's Dyson hair dryers, there's Dyson, all sorts of things. It's not just a Dyson vacuum cleaner, but it's one of the best vacuum cleaners in the world. He did not give up. And I think that's a huge message within that story.
I love that, Joe, because I've got a quote that ties in with that, and that's Thomas Edison. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 1,000 ways that do not work.
Exactly. And with whenever you're on a path to do something, and it can be anything, it can be doing a 5-kilometer run, it can be designing something, it's anything within your realm, whatever it is. But if you don't succeed the first time, you've learned a lesson. You've learned how not to do it. You go, okay, well, that part of it worked, that part of it didn't, and you take all the good stuff and you take the lessons about the things that didn't work and you just don't do them again. If you keep repeating them things over and over again, well, then you've got to go back and ask yourself a few questions. However, if you're prepared to change your recipe, if you're prepared to change how things happen, then there's nothing stopping you. You can get there in the end.
And the thing is about life that you and I know is that there's no set recipe, is that there's no beginning, there's no end. Life is a journey. It's not a place. I think when you're a teenager, you think you're going to get to your destination. When you're a parent, when you've got your business, when you've got your house, then you've arrived, but you never arrive. But I think I was really thinking about this because when I was reading about it, somebody wrote we should actually eradicate the word failure, because failure, there's nothing that is failure. Failure is just a way of rejigging, reorganizing, reassessing where you're at. It's just looking for different avenues to go. So the word failure, I think, comes back and is rooted in us from school, because school is about passing exams, passing tests, and it's either pass or fail. If you fail, then that word sits over you. I've got to succeed, I've got to pass. And I look at my 4 children, teenagers, young 20s, and they have this big thing about failure, and it comes down to academics. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to get the grade I need. So I think it is rooted in us, even from primary school. Have I passed the test? No, I failed. And so failure is a word that we put on young people. And I think it's really important that schools get that balance between what really failure is. There's very little to suggest at that age that failure is probably one of the most successful things that could happen to you in life. The most successful people in life have failed again and again and again. So actually, if we unravel the word failure, what actually is it?
No, I agree. It definitely is ingrained in us from childhood. Absolutely. And I think because failure itself isn't scary. It's the fear of failure. And it's that fear base. I mean, we can fear a lot of things, But when we start to fear failure, we build it up into something bigger than what it is. We tell ourselves a story. We associate things with that failure, like our worth. And that's when it becomes dangerous, because we are worthy for just being. We are worthy for getting up in the morning. We are worthy for just being human beings on this planet. We are worthy. We are enough. We are beautiful. But unfortunately, most people don't understand that concept. So they're trying to put worth on themselves. They're trying to find their worth. So therefore, when they fail, it makes them feel more worthless. And all these things are really interlinked. And it's really sad. I've lived that life. I've lived that life. I used to live on the hamster wheel. So I remember having my 4 children when they were little. And it never felt like I was doing enough because I was just a mum. Oh my God, what the hell is that? It doesn't even mean, just a mum. A mum is the most important job in the world. But years ago, it didn't have the same worth as what it's got now. And so I opened businesses, I was on PTAs, I was trying to find things, but still I felt like I was a failure. And you'd fail at things, like you'd try and be on the PTO, you'd try and do some kind of charity work, and perhaps you didn't earn as much money as what you wanted. So therefore you felt more wretched over and over again. And it was the fear that was there, and the trying to find your value in your worth. And I think that's where a lot of teenagers and young people are still.
And I think that's really critical, isn't it? Because as you say, it does come down to our sense of value and worth. If you look up the word failure in the dictionary, it says the feeling of being let down, letting yourself down, feeling unworthy and feeling useless. But actually comes back to, do we love ourselves? Do we know ourselves? And on that journey of discovery, how can we identify success and failure as both benefiting us on the journey of where we're going? Failed relationships, well, there's no such thing as a failed relationship. It's a young person, you're testing what sort of person you want to be with. Do they sort of fit what you're looking for? Do they fit your values? And it's trial and error, it's process of elimination. Same with careers. We interviewed a lovely chap, didn't we, Jack Cantrell, who was not sure what he wanted to do at university, and there's a sort of sense of fear of not doing law because it was a good prestigious degree to do, and now he's dropped out to do business. Is that not as good? Well, it's no failure, it's process of elimination. What fits me? What works for me? I'll go through a process of trial and error. There's no such thing as failure. There's such thing as trying what works for me and moving on a different path and a different journey and trying a different avenue. Chopping and changing is a better phrase probably than failure, isn't it?
But also do know and be aware that when failure happens, when it occurs, it can be really disappointing and it can be a little bit soul destroying at times. And that's okay, because if you've really tried to do something and then it doesn't work, it doesn't have the outcome that you were hoping, therefore it's a failure, let's say, yes, that can be disappointing. It's how you go about picking yourself up from that and moving on, because life is life, and we say it all the time, it's forever throwing stuff at us. And sometimes, I'm going to put it back to fitness because it's the one thing I know so well. Say if you really, really, really train to do a marathon, right? And you put all this time and effort in. So you're watching what you eat, you're fueling your body correctly, you're going out for your runs, you've got this amazing training plan. So you've run your half marathons, you've done your timed runs, you've done everything that it says. But on the day you wake up and you've got a cold. You've got a cold on that day. And then it's a real struggle. And then maybe you're running along and you're not as 100% as what you were. And then maybe you get a really bad cramp at 35 kilometers and you literally cannot carry on. Is that actually a failure? Well, yeah, it is, because you didn't finish you didn't cross the line. So yeah, we'll class it as a failure. However, there's lots of things in play there, and it doesn't mean you can't go out a few months later and do it again. But some people just won't. They'll go, I tried it once, it didn't work. Well, that's fine as well. It's how you deal with these things. Some things are, and maybe you don't have any of that. Maybe you don't have cramp, and maybe you don't have a cold, but maybe you still can't finish. That's okay as well.
Interesting though, isn't it? Because what you're saying means you have set yourself an expectation, i.e. you're going to run the marathon. Therefore, if you don't run the marathon, you have failed. But actually you haven't failed. You've just set yourself an expectation and you expected to meet that expectation. So if we remove expectation from the equation, does that mean there's no sense of failure?
But then I think if you start removing, I mean, I don't really like the word expectation, but I do see what you're saying. But if you remove all of that, what are we ever going to strive to as well? You know, our goals and our dreams are there to stretch us. And if we don't achieve it straight away, and if we fail along the way, it's character building. It teaches us things about ourselves. It teaches us things about others. It teaches us things about the world. It gives us such depth to our souls. And without them failures, I'm sorry, you do not enjoy success in the same way.
And maybe don't achieve success, actually. Do you know that Steven Spielberg was rejected from the University of Southern California of theatre, television and film 3 times? Steve Jobs was a college dropout. He was a fired technical executive. He was an unsuccessful businessman. And at 30, he was removed from the company he founded. And I'm going to try and find you what he said, because it's mind-blowing what he said about the company that he founded. Have I got it on there? Oh no, I've let it go, but it's quite mind-blowing. He was talking about if he hadn't have been fired from his own company, he wouldn't have learnt the lessons that were needed to then make the successful company later on. So the whole thing would have collapsed and folded. But the very fact that he was fired meant those skill sets, the tools, the techniques that he needed to be able to be successful in business, he learned on that journey. And that goes for all of us. I was thinking the other day, what were key areas of failure in my life? And the first one that came to mind was failing my driving test when I was 17. And I did deserve to fail it, because as I went out the driveway, I went on the wrong side of the road down the driveway. So I did deserve to fail it, but it was huge for me. You know, I had 2 weeks in this sort of sulky, sullen, depressive mood, thinking I had failed. And whereas now I look back on it and I just laugh. It didn't mean I wasn't going to pass again. It didn't mean I haven't been driving for the last 30 years. But at the time, it was so huge to me, because I was comparing myself with everyone else. Everyone else passed first time. If you didn't pass first time in those days, you were a failure. And of course, when everyone said to me, why did you fail? I couldn't possibly say I drove on the wrong side of the road. But it was such a big thing at the time. And I think for listeners now, especially young teens, young 20s, if you're listening to this and you feel as though you're in an area of your life where you're failing, you're not getting the grades that you want, you've got a failed relationship, there's no such thing. And it's huge to you right now. But when you look back, it won't be. And you'll look back and be really grateful that you were rescued out of a situation that you're not meant to be in, that a better person has come into your life, that you've got a career change of direction because you're not going on the path that you had an expectation you'd follow. So you'll look back and be so grateful. But Jo, when you're in it and you feel as though you failed, it's pretty tough, isn't it?
It is tough, and life is pretty tough. And again, we are forever talking about our mindset and our mind shift and getting your head around things and your thoughts around things. And that's where it lies. It's understanding that you are worthy, that you are enough, that you are lovable. Nothing you achieve will make you more lovable. You know, if you are hugely successful, it doesn't make you more lovable, because you are just amazing as you are. And I think, yeah, it's really hard when you are in that downward spiral and things don't seem to be going to plan for you. And, you know, maybe you are struggling to get grades or whatever, maybe you're struggling in your career, whatever it is that the area that you're finding difficult. But just try and turn it around, try and look at it from a different perspective. Say, what is this teaching me? What can I learn from this situation? Because there is always lessons to learn from every situation.
And lessons are really hard. They're good, but they're really hard, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this like, I spout off all of this stuff like it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy, but actually it's not. It's something that both you and I have practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced over the years. And still, we fail at it from time to time. And we are a big heap of mess on the floor, and one of us picks each other up. And that's okay, because we are human. We have emotions. We are supposed to have these, ebbs and peaks and whatever. So we're not gonna get it right all the time.
Do you know what I was looking at? We started podcasting, what, about August last year, didn't we? When you came up to me and said, do you want to do podcasts? And I just said yes. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and nor did you. And I was looking yesterday, reading a blog, how to set up a podcast. And it had lists of various things you have to do, like all the artwork, all the editing, all the equipment you need to get, and all the algorithms on, you know, everything that was so complicated. I looked at it and thought, gosh, if I had ever read that first, I would never have done it. But you and I just went, okay, well, how do you record on the computer? Push this button here. What should we talk about today? Let's talk about it. And we just made complete fools of ourselves. But we were prepared to make a fool of ourselves. We were prepared to fail. And we failed again and again. Yesterday, we did a recording and I couldn't say the word periphery. So I had to get you to say it. We fumble on our words, you make up a lot of words, you make the most extraordinary faces, but we just say, actually, we're just going to go for it. If we fail, we'll find another way to do it. And we have failed so many times. We sat in your wardrobe in the middle of winter because it was, I don't know why we sat in one of the first recordings we did, this is for listeners, this is how crazy we have been when we couldn't get it right. We sat in Joe's wardrobe. I don't know why, well, because it was good sound.
We were trying to get really good sound quality.
It was freezing. We sat in Joe's wardrobe under all these clothes hanging up in the middle of all her shoe collection. It was absolutely freezing. We tried to get a bit of a heater coming into the room, and we had our first podcast guest, and we were in fits of hysterics in your wardrobe, weren't we? And we just recorded.
Halfway through the recording, I had another giggling fit, which was so unprofessional. I had to turn the computer around so he couldn't see me. But again, we failed, but we got through it and we pulled ourselves together.
But interesting, because the opposite of failure is success. And there's negative connotations with success as well. So success breeds repetition. It's the same old, same old. I mean, look at coming out of lockdown now, the cafes have reinvented themselves, different ways of selling business. Success also teaches confidence, which is good. But if you become too confident, then you actually can go on and fail because you're not being innovative. And Bill Gates says, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking that they can't lose. Yeah. So we need to be in both. And you and I always talk about the kind of dichotomy of extremes. You can't have tall without short. You can't have fat without thin. You can't have happy without sad. You can't have love without sorrow. So we need the two extremes to appreciate each other. Success breeds failure. Failure breeds success. We need both, don't we, to be whole, healthy people.
Absolutely. Like, I remember listening to a talk not so long ago. A friend of a friend was an amazing athlete. She was an Olympic sailor. And she, of course, you know, when you're training for the Olympics, it's 4 years of full on training. It's all encompassed. Your whole life is about training, you know, food, structure, blah, 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 whatever. And she trained and trained and trained and trained and trained. And she'd already had one Olympics and got a silver. And she trained and trained and trained and trained and trained. Obviously, her goal was gold, always. And she got gold.
Wow.
She came back and she felt awful because she had not had any training on mindset.
Wow.
So she got what she wanted. She achieved her ultimate goal, her ultimate dream, and she had trained so hard for it. On the day the conditions were right, you know, the weather couldn't have been more perfect for her. Everything went according to plan, and she freaking deserved it, man. She got this gold medal. And, you know, she was euphoric for a couple of hours, you know, later that day, you know, the whole team, her coach, everybody's really happy, pumped up, but then came back and was totally lost. She had been on the pinnacle, she'd been at success, then didn't know how to deal with life. Just didn't have any idea. And again, it's mindset. It's trying to be happy with the person you are, at peace with the person you are, because no matter what you're striving for, no matter how many times you fail or succeed, if you ultimately are not happy within, then you're always going to be looking for something without.
And it's so true, isn't it? Because you can have an end goal in mind. I mean, I remember finishing my GCSEs and A-levels, being so excited for that day. And when the day came and it was my last exam, I actually felt really flat. Felt I didn't want to go out and party. I just sort of sat at home feeling a bit low, actually. And so you have this mindset that, you know, life's going to be amazing when this happens. But actually the message that you're saying is be grateful for what you've got and actually find the pleasure in the moment rather than in the future. And yes, we have goals and dreams and desires, and that's what stretches us to take us on that journey. But be really grateful for what you're at. Maybe if you're in a sports team, the end goal isn't a final performance or a challenge. I think of rowing because that's what I used to coach. So Mardy in New Zealand, Henley in England, or the Olympics in some major sport. You know, the end goal for training is that event, but actually to be enjoying the training, enjoying the atmosphere with your crew or your team, to be happy in the present. And even if you're struggling, to find the joy within. And you and I talk a lot about gratitude, don't we? So if you're always looking ahead to the event, you might not actually think today, gosh, I'm actually loading boats on the trailer. What fun it is to be climbing up with all my mates, trying to tie them on with ties, driving, sitting in the back of the van, whatever it is, to actually be in the moment and just enjoy the rowing, the running, the fitness, whatever it is, for the swimming, for what it actually is in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because success feels good. It does feel good. Of course it does, when you've worked super hard for something and you've failed along the way, you've had your knockbacks, you've been told no, then of course success does feel really good, but it does not make you a better person. I think the journey makes you a better person, and the lessons along the way might make you a better person because it teaches you things about yourself. But ultimately, success does not alter your worth. You are already awesome.
So can you think of a time in your life, Jo, where you might consider it was a major, at the time, failure, but since you think it was probably one of the biggest events that propelled you on a trajectory where you're at, the place you're at right now is because of that, or the lessons that you learned in that place have enabled you and empowered you where you're at right now?
I once owned two businesses at the same time. They were both in hospitality, and I sold the first one, which was great, fabulous, wonderful. Second one, and it wasn't due to bad business practice or anything like that, but the second one almost needed to go into liquidation. And it all happened around the time of my first marriage separation as well. And we live in a very small town, and whenever there's a marriage separation, people tend to avoid you. So when everybody avoided me, my business went
Oh gosh.
no. And so not only did I feel a failure because I had lost my family, and if anybody knows me, they know my family is my everything. And I was always a very romantic little girl, you know, and had all of these dreams about marriage being forever. So that was a big failure. And then my business failed at the same time, and I lost a lot of money. Now looking back, there was huge lessons in all of it. I had it helped me with my relationship with money. I respected it a heck of a lot more after that. And that's actually been a long journey to respect money and to have a different view of money, because that was something that was ingrained in a mindset that I'd taken on from childhood. So I've worked on that. And the whole failure about family, I mean, it took me a long time to grieve and heal over that. But again, I don't see that as a failure anymore. I see the successes in that. You know, we had a 16-year relationship. We had 4 beautiful children. And so what I could have dwelled on was all the negatives, but instead I choose to concentrate on the positives. And so, yeah, but can I say, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best thing that's ever happened to me or whatever, any of that, but I can definitely see the good part of both things.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I think, again, it comes back to when you're in it, it's really tough. When you look back on it, there's no regrets, because you can take the good things out of the situation that maybe you can't see if you're splitting up from a relationship right now. But interesting also, I think you hit on maybe shame, you know, talk about failed marriage shame, the shame of maybe people not coming to cafes, your business, because of thoughts and feelings, as you talk about when there's a marriage split. Shame is a big one. And we always say that people should never carry shame. Shame is a self-loathing. Shame is very different from guilt, isn't it? Guilt convicts us so we don't do something again. Shame means we don't like who we are because of something we've done. And when it comes to marriage, for those listening who've had a failed marriage. Again, we all set out, if we get married, we have the intention we're married for life. We're never going to become one of those divorcees in that bracket over there, because that's for other people, not us. So we never intend for things to go wrong in our life, but we don't need to carry shame. What we do need to carry is the lessons from it that help us grow, become richer people for it, take the experience with us, because I think shame is a crippling feeling.
I think shame is, as is, and like, you know, our whole topic today was fear of failure, and anything like fear itself is crippling. The fear of failure is often way worse than the failure itself.
So what would you say to people that are listening that are sort of paralyzed, feeling they can't go on, fear of the future because of a failure they have just had to deal with?
I'd say break it down into bite-sized chunks, because whenever you look at a really big picture, it's sometimes hard, it's overwhelming. Break it down to bite-sized chunks. If you can't face the whole day, don't bother. Face the next minute, face the next 15 minutes, think about that. Don't face the whole day. If you can't face a whole month, don't face a week. Think about a week in advance. Break it down to whatever you can cope with at the time. And everybody's fear of things is different, so it depends what you're coping with. If you're worrying about something to do with career, just do one job at a time. If you're worrying about studying, study one little bit at a time. If you're worried about your relationship, work on one aspect if you can. Just break it down into chunks.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And sometimes I used to say to my children, when they'd say, oh, I feel as I'm going to fail at this event, I'd say, in 10 years' time, will your life be different because you failed this exam today? You might not even remember it. So in the long-term scale of things, is your life going to be any different because of it? Probably be richer because of it.
Exactly.
Anyway, if you're listening to this, normally if you do a Facebook Live, you can see who's listening, can't you, Jo? And you can kind of say hi. We can't actually do that because we're on a Zoom Facebook Live. So if you're on here, hi, it's lovely to have you on board. Please leave us a comment, because then we know that you've been on listening to us. We hope you can take some tools and tips from fear of failure. There's no such thing as failure. It's only rejigging, going on a different path, taking the lessons from it, and becoming a richer person because of it. Winston Churchill said, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
Yeah, courage. I love the word courage. It's one of my favorite words. Courage, vulnerability. I love them. Beautiful. Yeah. And if we can carry on, it does take courage to live this life. It takes courage to be authentically you. Find that courage, because it's well worth it.
Yeah. And if you're in a place where you feel like quitting, here's one last one to leave you with. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever.
Exactly. And both Sue and I could have quitted many times along the way in our life, and we both have had hideous things happen to us. And here we are. We found each other. We're thriving. And we giggle quite a lot of the time.
You don't want to know what's happened to us. It's pretty bad. But we are here, as you say. Please go on to YouTube, subscribe, like our page, Pods with Posh and Paul. Please sign up to it. You'll get all the updates, all the latest chats coming out. We have an amazing new podcast series coming out next week. Teen Pods came out 2 weeks ago, and we have our usual once a week release. This Wednesday is going to be
Charlene Lynch.
Amazing story. Lovely to see you, Jo. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Love to all our listeners.